At the will reading. My parents gave my sister $10 million and told me to go on my own. Then Grandpa's lawyer stood up and read a secret he kept just for me. My mom started screaming. It was a warm September afternoon in Austin. When I pulled up in front of the old ranch house, the wind chimes on the porch clink faintly, the same sound that once meant safety and summer afternoons filled with laughter. Now it felt unfamiliar, almost hollow. I hadn't been here in over a year. Not because I didn't want to, but because I'd been told there was no one left to visit. When the front door creaked open, I was met not with a hug, but with a voice as cold as the rusted screen door. It came through. "So, you finally decided to show up." Grandma said, her eyes sharp, her arms crossed. I froze. Her words stung more than I expected. "Grandma, what's going on?" I asked, stepping closer. "They told me you were in a nursing home that you and Grandpa don't." She cut me off, raising one trembling hand. That single gesture felt like a slap. "Your grandfather called you Elena over and over on his deathbed. He kept asking for you, his little scientist. But you never answered. You never visited." My breath caught in my throat. "That's not true," I said, my voice shaking. "Please let me see the number." He was calling. She hesitated for a moment, then disappeared into the house. When she returned, she was holding a small notepad. The corners worn, the pages slightly curled. She handed it to me. I recognized Grandpa's handwriting instantly, but the number on the page wasn't mine. Not even close. "This isn't my number," I whispered. "I've had the same one since high school." Her brows furrowed. "They told us you changed it when you went off to college." She said, her voice quieter now, said, "You didn't want to be bothered, that you wanted space, that you were ashamed of us." "No," I said, stepping back, my legs suddenly weak. I grabbed the porch railing for support. "Grandma, I came home last spring break. I came here. Vanessa was here. She said no one was home." Grandma's face turned pale. "We were here. We've always been here." "Elena, what are you saying? They lied to me." I said, anger rising in my chest like a wave. "They told me you and Grandpa have been moved to a care facility out in Cedar Ridge. They said visitors weren't allowed because of quarantine. That it was best I stayed away and focused on school." Her lips parted, but no sound came. She looked as if the wind had been knocked out of her. "They said you didn't want to see us. She finally whispered that you said you had a new life now that we didn't belong in it." A bitter laugh escaped me, sharp and shaky. "I never said any of that. They cut me off from you on purpose. They didn't even tell me Grandpa was sick until it was too late. They told me the funeral was at 1 p.m. today. I got to the church and it was empty." She blinked slowly and sat down on the porch swing like her knees could no longer carry her. "The funeral was at 9 a.m., she murmured, realization dawning across her face like a shadow. They told everyone. You didn't show that, you didn't care." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I would never miss his funeral. Never. He was the only one who believed in me. The porch blurred as my eyes filled with tears without thinking. I dropped to my knees beside her and buried my face in her lap. For a long time we said nothing. Only the wind spoke, whispering through the trees like it too carried secrets. "He died thinking I didn't care," I sobbed. "We know the truth now," Grandma said softly, stroking my hair like she did when I was little. "We know, Elena." Grandma wiped her tears with the edge of her sleeve, then looked at me with a steadiness I hadn't seen in years. The sadness in her eyes hadn't disappeared, but now it was laced with something sharper resolve. She stood slowly, brushing imaginary dust from her skirt, then walked it into the house. I followed her in, unsure of what came next. In the living room, everything was exactly as I remembered, except the air. It was heavier now. She picked up the phone from its cradle by the kitchen wall. The old rotary phone clicked as she dialed each number, a deliberate choice that couldn't be undone. I watched her fingers, noticing how the skin had thinned over the years, the blue veins more prominent now beneath the surface. Yet there was nothing fragile about the way she held herself. The grief had hardened into something else. Determination. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed, but when she spoke, her voice had returned to that unshakable firmness I remembered from childhood. "Betty, yes, it's me," she said flatly. "I need you, Jacob, and Vanessa to come over right away." I heard a muffled voice on the other end. Grandma cut in before it could finish. "No, it can't wait. I'll be expecting you within the hour." She hung up without saying goodbye, then she turned to me. "The lawyer is on his way too," she said, her voice calm, but underneath it something was burning. "Your grandfather, he left some things that need to be read aloud in front of everyone." I didn't say a word. I only nodded. I wasn't ready for what was coming, but I had nothing left to lose. An hour later, the doorbell rang. "Stay in the kitchen until I call you," Grandma said, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. I sat at the small kitchen table, the one where Grandpa used to drink his morning coffee while reading science articles. I clipped out for him through the wall. I could hear their voices. Mom's overly cheerful tone. Dad's calculated politeness. Vanessa's trademark bored sigh, then silence. And finally, Grandma's voice. Clear and cutting. "Please everyone take a seat. Mr. Colin Reeves is here to read David's will." That was my cue. I stepped into the living room. All three heads snapped in my direction. My mother's fake smile faltered. My father's face went ghostly pale. Vanessa's lips parted, but no sound came. I could see the calculations spinning in their minds. Why was I here? Why had Grandma invited them under false pretenses? The living room felt smaller than I remembered. The faded floral sofa where my grandmother now sat. The armchair where my father perched uncomfortably. The antique coffee table with water rings from decades of iced tea glasses. It all seemed to shrink in the presence of what was about to unfold. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, with secrets about to surface. Mr. Reeves opened his briefcase slowly and pulled out a thick envelope, the kind that didn't just contain legal instructions, but secrets too. He cleared his throat. I, Walter Dawson, being of sound mind and clear intention, declared this to be my last will and testament. The room went utterly still, and Mr. Reeves continued reading to my beloved wife, Helen Dawson. I leave our family home and a lifelong financial provision for her care and comfort. Grandma's expression didn't change. She already knew. To my granddaughter, Elena Dawson, I leave the newly constructed research facility at 482 Pine Ridge Lane, including all laboratory equipment, intellectual property rights to any ongoing projects under my sponsorship, and the funds required for continued development and staffing. The room cracked. It was subtle at first, a sharp inhale from Dad, the twitch of Mom's eye. But it was Vanessa who broke the silence. "You've got to be kidding me." Her voice shook with fury. "You gave her the lab, the whole damn facility." Mr. Reeves didn't flinch. "And finally, the remainder of my estate accounts, assets, and investments shall be divided equally between my two granddaughters, Elena and Vanessa Dawson." The silence that followed was loud. Vanessa stood up so fast her chair screeched against the wooden floor. Her face was red. Her lips curled in disbelief. "This is insane." No. I was supposed to get everything. That's what you said." She turned on her parents' voice, cracking. "You promised. You told me if I visited him, acted like the good granddaughter, played along, everything would be mine." I stared at her frozen. They'd made her act like manipulate a dying man for money, and she'd done it willingly. But Grandma wasn't done. "There's more," she said, coldly reaching into the drawer beside her and pulling out a folded letter. Her hand shook as she passed it to Mr. Reeves. Walter wanted this read too. Mr. Reeves unfolded the letter slowly, careful not to tear the brittle edges. The paper had yellowed slightly, but Grandpa's handwriting remained bold and firm, as if he had written every word with unwavering clarity. He cleared his throat before reading aloud to my dearest Elena. "If this letter is being read, it means I'm no longer by your side. And though that thought breaks my heart, I hope these words carry some of the love I couldn't show you enough in life. You were always different. Not in a way that needed fixing, but in a way that made the world richer while others chased noise. You searched for truth, while they performed. You observed. You were my little scientist. My pride, my legacy." A sharp breath caught in my throat. I could already feel my mother's stare burning into me. But I didn't look away. I watched you grow up with questions in your eyes. No one around you seemed interested in answering. I saw the way you clutched your little notebook at 7 years old, recording how long it took rain to fill a glass jar. I saw how your joy dimmed every time your mother brushed you off, every time your father changed the subject. And I watched helplessly as your brilliance made them uncomfortable because they could not understand it, and worse, because they never tried. Vanessa shifted in her seat. Mom crossed her arms. Dad looked away. Vanessa was always louder, easier to praise, more comfortable for them to parent. And so they poured everything into her. Attention, affection, money. I don't blame her entirely for the way things unfolded. She played the part they wrote for her. But you, Elena, you built your own script. That took courage. I admired more than you ever knew. A tear slipped down my cheek. Grandma reached for my hand, gently squeezing it. I remember once after you won your first regional science competition, your parents didn't even come. They were at Vanessa's dress rehearsal. You came to the porch afterward holding the trophy in both hands, unsure of whether to be proud or ashamed. You asked if we could put it in the box under your bed instead of on the shelf. You said maybe if I don't show it, they'll stop looking at me like I'm someone else's kid. My heart broke that day. I felt the room shrink around me. My mother remained stiff. My father had gone pale. Vanessa was silent, biting her bottom lip. You deserved more than what they gave. Not just things, but recognition, warmth, space to be exactly who you are. And while I can't rewrite the past, I can make sure your future is built on your own terms. That's why I built a lab for you. That's why I changed the will. You're not a mistake. You are a miracle they never deserved. Mr. Reeves folded the letter slowly. The silence that followed was deafening. I remember the trophies, the box under my bed, the way I used to sit for hours rearranging them like puzzle pieces I didn't know how to display. I remembered hiding certificates in drawers. I remembered Vanessa saying, "Nobody likes to know it all." Every time I opened my mouth in front of her friends, and I remember doing her homework for her. "You're just better at this stuff," she used to say, dropping her books in front of me without even asking Vanessa. "That's cheating," I told her once. "Elena, help your sister." Mom had snapped from the hallway. Family helps family, but it was never help. It was control. There was a pattern. Vanessa demanded my parents enabled. And I complied because I thought maybe if I was useful, I'd be loved. Sometimes I'd hear them talking when they thought I was asleep. "I just don't get where she gets it from," Mom would whisper. "She's not like us," Dad would say, almost amused. "Maybe we brought home the wrong baby." They'd laugh. I never did. I stared down at my hands, now older, steadier, stronger than the ones that used to grip a magnifying glass in the backyard trying to catch sunlight in a jar. Grandpa had seen me. He'd always seen me. And now he'd made sure the rest of the world had to as well. I was always the quiet one, the one who stayed behind while the rest of the family moved like a polished unit. Vanessa. Always in the spotlight, my parents orbiting her like planets to a sun. I didn't need their attention. I told myself not really. But even lies grow heavy when you carry them long enough. While Vanessa danced on stage in glittering costumes, I sat in the back row of the auditorium holding my breath every time Mom stood to applaud. She never clapped like that for me. I don't even think she knew when my science fair was. I remember one birthday. I must have been 10. Grandma and Grandpa had driven down from the ranch, and Grandpa gave me a microscope kit wrapped in newspaper with a bow made from twine. I was ecstatic. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Of course she'd want a box of germs," she muttered. Mom laughed. "Well, that's our Elena, always a little oddball." That night, I set up the microscope on the kitchen counter. Too excited to wait. I prepared slides upon water, bits of onion skin, flower petals, anything I could get my hands on. But just as I leaned in to focus the lens, Mom's voice cut through the hallway like a blade. "Elena, clean that up. Vanessa's friends are coming over. I don't want your science mess out." She didn't even look at me when she said it. That was the pattern. Vanessa had people. She had parties, celebrations, the kind of family photos where everyone was smiling. I had books quiet. A world I built out of pages and formulas because the real one had no room for me. Even when I achieved things, scholarships, awards, invitations to summer research camps, my parents treated them like chores. "I have to fill out more paperwork." "Can't you skip this one? We already did the last camp. What about Vanessa's trip to Miami?" "We can't be everywhere." They didn't realize those were the only things keeping me afloat. Recognition from strangers meant more than silence from my own blood. And it wasn't just neglect. Sometimes it felt like resentment, like my very existence. Complicated the story they wanted to tell about our family at school. I overheard my mom talking to another parent once. "Elena. Oh, she's our little genius," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "A bit intense sometimes, but we're trying to help her be more normal." I remember retreating to the bathroom and locking the stall, gripping the edge of the toilet tank to keep from shaking, even in moments when I tried to reach them. When I got into the gifted program, when I was accepted early to university, they responded with fear, not pride. "Are you sure you're ready for that? You'll be so far away." "Don't rush through life, Elena. It's okay to be ordinary," but I wasn't ordinary. I never had been. And Grandpa knew he was the only one who didn't try to make me smaller. He once found me crying behind the barn, after Vanessa had told me I'd never be pretty enough to matter. I must have been 12. He didn't ask what happened. He just handed me a pocket-sized notebook and said, "Write the things they don't understand." One day, the world will. That notebook stayed with me through high school, through every failed experiment, every lonely lunch, every invisible birthday. It was my anchor, my armor. Now sitting in this living room with that same family across from me, pretending I didn't deserve any of this. Pretending I was the selfish one, I felt the full weight of those years settle around me like armor reforged. They had spent a lifetime trying to dim my light, but Grandpa built me a space where I could shine without apology. And now they had no choice but to watch. The silence after the letter was read didn't last long. Vanessa shut up from her chair, her face a flush of rage and disbelief. Her voice cracked as she spat the words. "This is ridiculous. Why should she get anything? She wasn't even there. She disappeared for years and suddenly she walks in and takes half of everything. The lab, the money." Her eyes darted to Mom and Dad. "You said it was mine. You promised." My mother's face was blank, unreadable, but her fingers twisted in her lap like she was trying to wring water from air. "We had an understanding." Vanessa continued, her voice rising with every word. "I did what you asked. I played the role. I visited him when you told me to. I said all the right things. I was the perfect granddaughter." Her voice cracked. "You made me beg a dying man for his favor." That sentence hung in the air like smoke. After a gunshot, even Grandma blinked. And now I'm supposed to just share. Vanessa let out a dry, bitter laugh with her. I looked up slowly, meeting her eyes for the first time since I entered the room. I had no anger left. No fear. Just clarity. "You didn't visit him because you cared," I said quietly. "You visited because you were told there'd be a reward." Vanessa froze. "You never spent hours with him talking about books or experiments or his garden." I continued, my voice calm. "You never sat by his hospital bed unless someone told you to. I may have been locked out by lies, but at least I was honest about how I loved him enough." Mom snapped, standing abruptly. "This is not the time to lecture your sister Elena. You don't understand the pressure. We've all been under pressure." I repeated, nearly laughing. "You mean the pressure of hiding the truth, of isolating me from the only people who supported me, that stood straightening his shirt collar like he was preparing for a boardroom meeting?" "Elena, let's be reasonable," he said smoothly. "Think about what you're doing. You've already had your education fully paid for all those science camps, the competitions, the international travel. Do you know how much that cost us?" The room tilted. My breath caught, then steadied. "You didn't pay for any of that," I said, voice low but sharp. "Grandma and Grandpa did every application fee, every plane ticket, every piece of lab equipment. It was all them, not you." Dad opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "You made it clear from the start I wasn't your priority. You made that very clear." "That's not the point," Mom snapped. "Family means sacrifice. Vanessa needs this more than you. If you want to honor your grandfather's memory, you'll sign over your share." Grandma stood now slowly. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "How dare you?" she said, her voice so sharp the air seemed too thin. "How dare you stand here in the house my husband built and speak of sacrifice?" Mom blinked. "Helen, no." Grandma snapped. "You deceived him. Manipulated him. You lied to his face while he was dying, and now you have the nerve to speak of family." She turned to Vanessa. "You may have played your role, girl, but it was never love. It was a transaction, and I'm ashamed to say I didn't see it sooner." Vanessa's face twisted, but she said nothing. Grandma took a breath. Her hand gripped the armrest of her chair with quiet fury. "I only regret that David left you anything at all." Then she turned toward the door. "Leave," she said, her voice steady. "All of you, you're not welcome here." No one moved, so she raised her voice, not in volume but in conviction. Now Mom tried to reason. "Helen, we're family." "Not anymore," she said. Vanessa stormed out, first heels clacking like gunshots on the wooden floor. My parents followed, muttering something about legal challenges and reconsideration. But they left, and for the first time in my life, they couldn't take anything with them. The house fell into silence again, a quieter silence. Not sharp, just free. As the door closed behind them, I felt something shift inside me. Not just relief, but a strange new emptiness that wasn't entirely unpleasant. It was the absence of something I'd carried for too long. The desperate need for their approval, the weight of their expectations, the constant disappointment. Without it, I felt lighter. Grandma and I stood in the hallway listening to the car door slam, the engine start, the tires crunch on gravel as they drove away. "What now?" I asked, my voice sounding unfamiliar in the quiet house. Grandma looked at me. Really looked at me. Perhaps for the first time since I'd arrived. "Now we rebuild," she said simply, just like Walter would have wanted. That night, I slept in my old room at the ranch. The ceiling still had those glow-in-the-dark stars. Grandpa had helped me stick up there when I was 9. I'd mapped out actual constellations, insisting they'd be accurate. I remembered him standing on a chair, patiently following my instructions while I consulted my astronomy book. "Move Orion's belt 2 inches to the left," Grandpa I called out, so serious about it all. In the darkness, those plastic stars still glowed faint but persistent, like memories that refuse to fade even when everything else changes. It's been 6 years since that day. 6 years since the front door slammed behind my parents and sister. They're angry. Footsteps echoing off the porch like the last remnants of a storm finally blowing out to sea. I haven't spoken to them since. Sometimes their names pop up on my phone. Unknown numbers, recycled emails, friend requests through fake accounts, but I delete them all without opening. I don't need to hear their apologies. Not when they're only born of absence. They made their choice and so did I. The lab Grandpa left me, my lab grew from a private research space into something real, something that mattered. We named it the Walter Dawson Innovation Center. And we didn't just keep his name alive, we honored his faith. We specialize in sustainable agricultural technologies, micro-irrigation systems, adaptive crop genetics, eco-friendly pest management. Things that once lived in the margins of science fairs now make their way into struggling farms across the state. Last month, I stood on a stage in San Francisco accepting a national grant for innovation and climate resilience. I wore a navy blue suit and my mother's silence-like armor. The crowd clapped. The spotlight didn't blind me. I looked into it and didn't flinch. And beside the stage, framed under the foundation's logo, was a photo of Walter Dawson smiling in front of a field of sunflowers. The caption read, "For the dreamers who invest in those the world overlooks." Somewhere I think you saw it. The path wasn't always easy. There were nights I doubted everything myself, my abilities, whether I could really build something from scratch without falling apart. There were failed experiments, grant applications, rejected moments when the weight of Grandpa's expectations felt too heavy to carry. But each time I faltered, I remembered his words, right? The things they don't understand. One day the world will. And slowly the center grew. First, it was just me and 2 graduate students working out of what was essentially a converted barn with state-of-the-art equipment that seemed almost comically out of place among the wooden beams. Now we have a staff of 27 researchers, 4 departments, partnerships with 3 universities and field sites in 12 counties across Texas. Tara and Micah, my closest friends since university, now lead departments within the center. We laugh a lot. We still mess up experiments, still burn popcorn in the break room microwave. But we also change lives, not because we're smarter, but because someone believed we could. Last spring, we hosted our first youth science camp. 15 kids from rural communities, each with that same look I once had. Hungry for knowledge, desperate to be seen. One girl, barely 13, with thick glasses and a quiet voice, showed me her notebook filled with observations about native bee populations in her hometown. Her calculations were rough but intuitive, her questions brilliant and their simplicity. When I told her this, she looked at me with such surprise that I had to turn away to hide my tears. "You actually read it," she said, as if that was the most extraordinary thing I could have done. I knew then that Grandpa's legacy wasn't just about the research or the facility. It was about breaking cycles, about seeing potential where others saw inconvenience. We've expanded the youth program to reach over 150 students annually. Now we call it the Little Scientists Initiative, a name that never fails to make me smile. Each participant receives a leather-bound notebook similar to the one Grandpa gave me behind that barn so many years ago. On the first page, we've printed his words, "Write the things they don't understand. One day, the world will." Some of our first participants are now entering college with full scholarships to study environmental science and sustainable agriculture. The center itself has grown beyond anything I could have imagined. What started as a modest research facility has expanded to include 5 modern laboratory buildings, 3 greenhouse complexes, and over 60 acres of experimental growing fields. We've partnered with international research organizations from Brazil to Kenya, sharing our innovations with farmers facing the harshest effects of climate change. Last year, our drought-resistant corn variant helped feed an estimated 40,000 people in regions where traditional crops had failed for 3 consecutive seasons. The irony isn't lost on me that the very qualities my family tried to suppress, my methodical thinking, my obsession with details, my preference for quiet observation over performative confidence, are precisely what made this work possible. There's a certain poetic justice in that, I suppose. 3 years after the whistle reading, I received a letter from a lawyer representing Vanessa. She was requesting permission to visit the center. At first, I thought it was another attempt to challenge the will, but when she arrived, I barely recognized her. Gone was the polished appearance, the practiced smile, the rehearsed charm. She seemed smaller, somehow more authentic in her uncertainty. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, standing awkwardly in the main lobby, staring at Grandpa's portrait above the reception desk. "I just wanted to see what he built for you, what you've built with it." I gave her the tour, showed her the labs, the greenhouses, the fields where we were testing new irrigation systems. She asked intelligent questions, took genuine interest. When we reached the community garden where local families grow their own food using our methods, she paused. "He always knew who you were," she said quietly. "Even when I didn't. Even when I pretended not to. We don't speak often. Vanessa and I. The damage runs too deep for casual reconciliation. But twice a year she volunteers at our youth science camp. She teaches the kids about presentation skills, how to communicate complex ideas to non-scientific audiences. It's a small bridge, but it's something neither of us thought possible. My parents have made no such overtures. Last I heard, they had moved to Florida after Dad's early retirement from the investment firm. Sometimes I see Mom's name attached to charity. Galas in social media posts or local newspaper coverage that occasionally appears in business journals offering commentary on market trends. They exist in a world parallel to mine. Neither of us crossing the boundary. Grandma lived at the ranch until last year when her arthritis made the stairs too difficult. Now she has an apartment connected to my house in town, close enough that I can check on her daily, but separate enough that she maintains her independence. We have coffee together most mornings. She tells me stories about Grandpa. I never knew how they met at a county fair, when she knocked over his prize-winning tomato display. How he proposed with a ring tied to a sapling he planted in her parents' yard, how he spent 30 years tending that tree until it bore fruit. Sometimes I wonder if Vanessa ever thinks about that day, whether Mom still hosts dinner parties, and says I have 2 daughters with a practiced smile. I wonder if Dad still calls himself a man of principle, but most days I don't wonder at all what occupies my thoughts. Instead, are the projects that line our research calendar for the coming years. The drought-resistant wheat variant that's showing promising results in our test fields. The solar-powered irrigation system we've been perfecting for small-scale farmers. The soil remediation technique that could transform depleted farmland within a single growing season. We've just secured a $25 million grant from the National Science Foundation to expand our research into climate-adaptive agriculture. It's the largest grant in our center's history, and I found myself wishing I could call Grandpa here. His voice cracked with pride when I told him. Instead, I'd walk the path behind the old ranch house, sat on a wooden bench he built decades ago, and watch the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. Sometimes I still talk to him there, update him on our progress, share the small victories and frustrating setbacks. Last night, Grandma joined me on that bench. At 87, she moves more slowly now, but her mind remains sharp as ever. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, then she reached into her cardigan pocket and handed me a small velvet pouch. "I should have given this to you years ago," she said, but somehow it never felt like the right time. Inside was Grandpa's pocket watch, the one he carried every day of his adult life. The silver case was worn smooth from decades of handling the initials engraved on the back, nearly faded away. When I opened it, I found something unexpected. A tiny photograph carefully cut to fit inside the lid. It was a picture of me at my first science fair, beaming next to my display on honeybee communication. "He carried you with him," Grandma said simply. "Every day I've placed the watch on my desk at the center where the morning sun catches it. Just right, sending little circles of light dancing across my research notes. It reminds me that legacy isn't measured in dollars or accolades, but in the quiet certainty that someone believed in you enough to invest in your potential." Our latest research project focuses on something Grandpa always talked about: finding ways to help small family farms survive in an increasingly corporatized agricultural landscape. We've developed a cooperative model that allows independent farmers to share resources, knowledge, and market access without sacrificing their autonomy. The pilot program launched in 3 counties last year, and already we're seeing families who are on the verge of selling their land, finding new paths to sustainability. When I walk through those farms now, watching children help their parents implement our irrigation systems or test soil samples using our simplified field kits, I see the future unfolding in real time. I see families staying together, communities remaining intact, knowledge passing from one generation to the next. Not despite change, but because of it. Yesterday, I was rearranging one of the old bookcases in the lab's library, something I hadn't touched in years. Tucked inside a battered copy of The Nature of Things, I found a photograph. I knew the moment I saw the faded edges. It was me, maybe 8 years old, crouched in the grass behind the barn, holding a magnifying glass up to a beetle on a leaf. Grandpa stood beside me, pointing to something in the distance. We were both smiling on the back of the photo in his careful, deliberate handwriting. He had written, "My little scientist will change the world someday." I sat there for a long time holding it like something sacred, because now I know he was right. Story 2. Hello, this is Sarah. I'm going to read you Victoria's tale today, which is called This. My key didn't fit when I got home from a long day at work. We won't let you in unless you pay for our trip, my mom texted. Shivering from the cold, I slept in the vehicle. I packed my belongings in the morning and terminated the lease and departed in the evening. Calls were ringing on my phone. All right, let's leave. In my parents' home, it was always Jessica, Jessica, and Jessica. To them, there was nothing wrong with my elder sister, when I was only there. For as long as I could remember, everything had been that way. Most people call me Victoria Tori, and at 27 I had finally adapted to being the Carter family's afterthought. I was doing rather well for myself, even if I was the disappointment to the family. As a corporate account manager at TechSpear Solutions, I had a terrific work and made a fair living. My parents never recognized it though. For the past year I have been renting a lovely small home in Meadowbrook, a peaceful neighborhood around 30 minutes from the city center. I even have an expanding savings account set up for a down payment on a home of my own. One day, 3 years ago, Jessica, 30, married Ryan, her college love. My parents lavished much too much money on their lavish wedding. Naturally, I was a bridesmaid and I was dressed in a dreadful peach dress that Jessica had chosen especially for me since she knew I would look awful in it. Tonight is family supper. On a Tuesday morning, my mother texted me, "Avoid being late like you did the prior time." Gazing at my phone, I let out a sigh. I suffered family meals every month because of some misguided feeling of duty, but I just said, "I'll be there," and returned to getting ready for my morning meeting. Jessica's brand new SUV was already parked in my parents' driveway when I pulled in that evening. She had arrived early, of course, most likely to assist mom in the kitchen and get extra points as the beloved kid. During dinner, my mother would ask Jessica about her work at the real estate agency. My father would nod enthusiastically at everything my sister said, and I would nibble at my food while occasionally using as little words as possible to respond directly to inquiries. Then Jessica gave a big clearing of her throat over dessert. "Ryan, Mom, Dad and I have some wonderful news." I was already picturing how much worse my life would get after Jessica gave birth to the first grandchild, so I prepared myself for a pregnancy announcement. "We've made the decision to launch our own company," Jessica said, holding Ryan's hand. My folks let out a shout. In fact, my mom gave a clap. Mom said, "Oh honey, that's wonderful." "What sort of company?" "A boutique of luxury clothes," Jessica stated with a smile. Downtown, we discovered the ideal store location that drew my eye. I put a lot of effort into earning my degree in business management. "Have you conducted a market research by attempting to maintain a neutral tone? In contrast to Jessica, who barely passed her real estate license exam, retail in the downtown area may be quite competitive." Jessica rolled her eyes. "Don't worry just yet. You don't have to think about everything all the time. I'm not thinking too much. These are fundamental business inquiries." "Have you determined the initial expenses, anticipated income?" "Timeline for breaking even. You see, this is the reason no one enjoys speaking with you." Jessica lost her temper. "You have no knowledge of retail fashion. I'm passionate about this." Jessica straightened her posture. "There's actually one more item. To begin, we require some funding." There was silence in the room. I sensed that things was headed in a negative direction. "We hoped you could assist us," Jessica said, still glancing at our parents. "After the business takes off, you might want to get a mortgage on the property. We'll reimburse you plus interest. It's a given." My mouth fell open. It's been 30 years since they left that house. In a sense, it paid off. It is a really bad concept. Before I could stop myself, I blurted out, "You can't rest your house on a business that hasn't even begun yet, Mom and Dad. Not a retail company with such a high failure rate in particular." Jessica's voice rose as she emphasized that the firm would not fail. "God, Tori, you're just envious because you're wasting your life in that corporate drone job while Ryan and I are taking a risk on something we believe in." Feeling envious, I said it again incredulously. "My goal is to prevent my parents from becoming homeless." "No, you're attempting to prevent my success." Jessica got to her feet and yelled, "You have always been envious of me now. The idea that I could succeed and earn more money than you with your fancy business degree is too much for you to handle." The artificial tears that Jessica had mastered to gain what she wanted were now in her eyes. I got up and left the table. This is absurd. I refuse to sit here and be held accountable for actions I haven't taken. Please consider this thoroughly before making any judgments, parents." Mom answered, "We will, sweetheart," but it was obvious from her tone whose side she supported. I drove home after bidding my folks farewell and ignoring my sister and her husband. The sinking sensation in my gut persisted. I was fully aware of what would occur. Jessica would manipulate while crying. I would somehow be the bad person for attempting to avert a catastrophe, and my parents would cave in. I was in the middle of a work presentation when my phone called 3 weeks later. I chose to ignore it, but I quickly excused myself when it rang again. "Hi there, Victoria." My father was using my entire name. He sounded worn out. "We provided funding for Jessica and Ryan's business." I shut my eyes, with their backs to the wall. "What is the amount the residence was refinanced by us?" $200,000. "Dad, Jesus. Everything will be well. Their business plan is good. Jessica showed us everything." I wagered my tongue not to express my true feelings. "I'm hoping it goes well." I hung up and went back to my meeting after saying that. My parents mortgaged their home about a year ago today. At 11 p.m., my doorbell rang. Tuesday evening, I had not yet fallen asleep. I'm sitting on my couch reviewing some work materials. My parents were waiting there when I answered the door, appearing 10 years older than they actually were. Dad appeared smaller, seemingly stooped down with a vacant expression in his eyes, while Mom's eyes were swollen from sobbing. Mom murmured, hardly raising her voice above a whisper, "We lost the house." I wanted to, but I didn't say I told you. But I was halted by the shattered expressions on their faces. Instead, I stepped aside and said, "Come in." I offered them my extra bedroom that evening. We didn't communicate much. The basic minimum was what they told me. After 8 months, Jessica and Ryan's store had collapsed. Overpriced products, an absurd lease, and a few business visits to fashion shows that were actually simply lavish holidays blew up the funds. My parents were unable to make the bank-assigned mortgage payments when the firm failed. Take note of that morning. I contacted my boss the next day and asked to work from home. I assisted my parents in bringing over the little items they were permitted to remove from the house by the bank. Some outfits, family pictures. Mom's china, which her mother had given her as a wedding present. "It's only a temporary situation. As we moved boxes into my rented home," Dad continued to say, "only until we are able to stand again." I nodded because I didn't think I could talk without saying something I would later regret. Another surprise was released 2 weeks later. The automobile of Jessica and Ryan was in my driveway when I got home after a rare day at work. Ryan was slumped next to my sister, who was seated at my kitchen table as if she owned the space. With a stiff smile that stopped short of her eyes, Jessica remarked, "There she is. What's happening?" I put down my laptop bag and asked. Mom came out carrying a cup of tea from the kitchen. "Ryan and Jessica need somewhere to stay for a while. They were evicted by their landlord due to non-payment of rent. You also assured them that they were welcome to stay at my residence." I made an effort to speak clearly. Dad replied from the living room, staring at the TV. "We're family Tori. Families remain united." I turned to face my sister. I knew her well enough to realize it was an act, but she had the grace to at least look a little embarrassed. "We'll assist," she pledged. "Mom will prepare meals for everyone and I will clean. You won't even be aware of our presence. How might I proceed?" "Put my family on the streets because they are homeless." I so accepted their agreement. The cooking would be done by Mom. On the weekends, I would buy food for everyone while Jessica cleaned. Ryan and Dad would. They didn't really offer to do anything, though. The initial month was doable. Dinner would be cooked when I got home because I worked late most evenings anyhow. After sharing a meal and engaging in awkward small chat, everyone would withdraw to their designated areas. In the extra room are my parents. Me and my bedroom, Jessica and Ryan in the renovated den. For 5 adults, the home was modest, but we managed. Cracks, however, began to appear during the second month. The supper dishes would be in the sink, unwashed when I got home. Mom said that cooking for 5 was too much labor for her at her age, and stopped doing it. Upon my arrival, I discovered that my parents had prepared their own meal, and Jessica and Ryan had followed suit. I used the groceries I paid for to make both dinners. In the meantime, I had nothing left. When I went home from work after the 3rd consecutive night of discovering an empty refrigerator, I first ate at the cafe next to my workplace before going home. I didn't need the extra cost, but it was preferable to starvation. The cleaning that Jessica pledged to do on the weekends got increasingly irregular. She had an explanation for everything. Her new part-time work had left her exhausted. She was suffering from a headache. In order to network for greater job chances, she was making acquaintances. I'd had enough one Saturday morning in the midst of the 3rd month. I spent the weekend reading a novel that I had been attempting to complete for weeks rather than going to the grocery store like I usually did. The refrigerator was empty when my family got back from seeing some relatives in the afternoon. Not knocking, Mom barged into my room. She replied accusingly, "There is no food in the house." Saturday is here. On Saturdays, you always go shopping. Today, I made the decision not to. I spoke in a relaxed tone. When did you intend to inform us that we were hungry? I put down my book. Purchasing groceries that vanish before I can consume them is something I'm sick of. Everyone is now able to purchase their own meals. Mom's face became frighteningly crimson. Following everything that we have done for you. Done for me, I interrupted her. My residence is yours without any rent. I only requested that Jessica clean and you cook. These two things are no longer occurring. Then she turned and bounded off. In the living room, I could hear her grumbling to Dad and Jessica, who were raising their voices in outrage. I returned to my reading after plugging in my ears. For a week, they were treated in silence. It seemed innocent, yet somehow serene. I purchased a little mini fridge from my bedroom and filled it with my own groceries. No one talked to me as I entered and departed from the residence. The Cold War in my home eventually subsided. One evening, while I was carrying my takeaway food to my room, my mother came up to me. "Can we discuss Victoria?" As usual, when she was attempting to seem serious, she requested using my entire name. After giving her a nod, I went to the kitchen table with her. Ryan, Dad, and Jessica were already seated there, all of them wearing serious expressions. "We have been considering." Mom began looking around for encouragement from the others. "Lately, things have not been going well." Jessica said, "We want to fix it," in a softer than normal voice. "We are aware that we haven't been doing our share." I arched an eyebrow but said nothing. "We would like to return to our initial setup." Mom went on, "On the weekends, Jessica will clean and I will prepare dinner for everyone, if you'll resume your grocery shopping." I looked at their faces to see if they were sincere. Dad was unable to look me in the eye. Ryan was using a paper napkin as a fidget. Jessica was trying her hardest to appear apologetic, but I could see the thought process behind her face. "What caused the abrupt change of heart?" I inquired. Mom said, "We missed being a family." Furthermore, none of us can afford to continue purchasing groceries separately. That was at least truthful. I thought about what I could do. In all honesty, I missed eating healthy, home-cooked meals. And although the silent treatment was soothing, it was also isolating. All right, I did agree at last, but that's it. If things go wrong again, not even in my own house will I be exploited. They all gave enthusiastic nods. In a matter of weeks, we were back to our previous arrangement. Everything went without a hitch. Mom prepared filling meals. On the weekends, Jessica did a thorough cleaning, and I made sure the refrigerator was stocked. It was bearable, but we weren't exactly the Brady Bunch. Then, one early November evening, I sensed a change in the air. When I got home, the dinner table was already occupied by Mom, Dad, Jessica, and Ryan, but they all fell silent as soon as I walked in. As I washed my hands and hung up my coat, they looked at each other. "What's happening?" I sat down at the table and asked. Mom smiled too brightly as she served the lasagna she had prepared. All we were discussing was Thanksgiving. "It's only 2 weeks away, right?" I said, accepting the plate. She handed me. "I'll have to work the day before, but I should be able to help with the cooking on the actual day." Another set of glances were exchanged around the table. "Actually," Jessica said, setting down her fork, "we were thinking of doing something different this year. We thought it might be nice to get away just a little vacation to clear our heads. After everything that's happened this year, I passed midnight a vacation where there's this lovely resort in Sedona." Dad said, suddenly animated, "They have a special Thanksgiving package with all the traditional food, but none of the work. Plus hiking spa treatments." "The work sounds expensive," I commented, looking around the table. Silence descended again, broken only by the sound of forks against plates, so I prompted when no one spoke. "Are you asking if I want to join you? Because I already mentioned I have to work that week." "Oh, we know you can't come," Jessica said quickly. "That's why we thought it would be a perfect time for us to go. So you don't feel bad about missing out." I set my fork down. "If you all know I can't come, why are you telling me about this vacation plan?" More uncomfortable silence. "You want me to pay for it?" I said flatly. Realization dawning. That's what this is about. Mom reached across the table and patted my hand. "Not pay for it exactly. Just help out a little. We all need a break." "Tori, it's been such a hard year. You want me to fund a vacation that I'm not even going on? You can afford it," Jessica said, a hint of her usual entitlement creeping back into her voice. "We all know how much you make. That's not the point." I replied, feeling my blood pressure rising. The point is that you're asking me to pay for a luxury vacation for 4 adults who aren't contributing anything to this household financially. We're family, Dad said as if that explained everything. And your mother and I aren't getting any younger. We deserve to enjoy our golden years, and Ryan and I are still recovering financially, Jessica added. It could be years before we're back on our feet. I looked at each of them in turn. These people who were supposed to love me but seem to only see me as an ATM. Now I'm not paying for your vacation. If you want to go to a resort for Thanksgiving, you'll need to pay for it yourselves. But we can't afford. Jessica started. Then you can't go, I interrupted. That's how money works. If you can't afford something, you don't get to have it. That's selfish, Ryan said, speaking up for the first time. After everything your family has done for you? I laughed a brief, bitter sound. What precisely have you done for me lately? Live at my house rent-free. Eat food I pay for. Take advantage of my kindness at every step. We reared you, Mom remarked, her voice shaking with either real passion or a wonderful imitation of it. We sacrificed for you, and I've been repaying that obligation for months now. I answered, but I draw the line at sponsoring expensive holidays. The remainder of supper passed in frigid quiet. As soon as I finished eating, I excused myself and went to my room, shutting the door behind me. I heard them talking in quiet, furious tones in the living room, but I turned on my TV to shut them out. The next morning, they were all still giving me the cold shoulder. I went to work and concentrated on the large project I was managing. Staying late to avoid coming home to the poisonous atmosphere, this became my new normal. Early mornings, late evenings, I don't spend much time with my family. A week went by in this manner. The household tension was getting intolerable. No one was talking directly to me, however. Sometimes when I entered a room, I heard people whispering to each other, and when they saw me, they stopped talking. A week prior to Thanksgiving, I worked past my regular hours at the office one evening to complete a project that needed to be finished before the holiday. It was almost midnight when I was done. There was nobody in the office. I was worn out after the cleaning crew had arrived and left. I just wanted to go home, get into bed, and take a nice shower. The streets were deserted at that hour on a weekday, and the trip home was peaceful. All of the lights in the home were off when I pulled into my driveway. It must be a relief to think that everyone was asleep. Tonight, avoid unpleasant situations. With my house key in hand, I approached the front door and inserted it into the lock. It refused to turn. I thought it could be trapped, so I tried again, gently wriggling it. Nothing has changed. I took out the key and examined it in the porch light. Without a doubt, it was the home key I had been using for the previous 12 months. I came to the knowledge at that point. The locks had been replaced. When no one replied, my disbelief rapidly gave way to rage, and I began hammering on the door. I kept pressing the doorbell until the bells merged into a single grating sound that would undoubtedly wake everyone inside. Nothing has changed. Then I caught a glimpse of movement behind the drapes. Someone was awake and at home, observing me without responding. It was the door I banged on. "You're in there, I know that. Now open the door." No answer. I took a step back, gazing up at the second story. Someone peered through the blinds in my parents' room, and the light flickered for a moment. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. My mom sent me a text message. "Until you agree to cover the cost of our trip, we won't allow you in. It's for your own benefit. Victoria, you must learn to be less self-centered." I couldn't comprehend what was occurring, so I just gazed at the message. I was locked out of my own home by my own family. I was extorted out of money by the residence I was paying for. I had the option to contact the police. That was my home. Something stopped me, even though my name was on the lease. It could have been the final vestige of my familial ties. Or perhaps it was simply fatigue. Rather, I went back to my vehicle, cranked up the heat, and made every effort to get into the driver's seat. The chill seeped in anytime the engine shut off to conserve petrol, interrupting the fits of sleep. I woke up before morning, shivering and completely rigid. I watched as individuals moved behind the drapes and the house's lights turned on. While I sat locked out in my car, morning procedures were taking place inside my house. At 7 o'clock, my mother emerged as the front door opened. Her smile made my blood boil as she walked up to my car. Just enough for me to hear her, I rolled down the window. "Have you had a chance to consider what we discussed?" As though she hadn't had me spend the night in my car, she requested in a friendly manner. Slowly, despite the restless night, I nodded, my thoughts suddenly clear. "I have indeed." She grinned broadly. "Excellent. After that, you are free to return inside." Stretching my sore back, I got out of the car and followed her to the front door. Ryan, Jessica, and my father were eating breakfast at the kitchen table inside. As I entered their looks, a mix of smugness and fake worry, they glanced up. "Good morning, drowsy head." Jessica grinned as she spoke. "Do you want pancakes?" I didn't answer. Rather, I went directly by them to my bedroom and shut the door. I informed my manager over the phone that I had to take a personal day due to family obligations. He was sympathetic. I seldom ever took a vacation. After that, I waited as I heard my family preparing for work. They walked out of the home one by one. Mom and Dad work part-time jobs. Ryan and Jessica to their daily activities. At 9 o'clock, the home was finally deserted. I hurried out of my closet. I took out the luggage I had saved from my previous trip. I carefully packed essential documents, clothing, toiletries, and a few sentimental items. The rest might be swapped out. I then gave my landlord a call. "My lease must be terminated," I informed him. "Is there a problem with the house?" His voice was worried as he asked, "It's a family matter, no. I have to leave." I gave a brief explanation omitting the more embarrassing details. Although the lease permits termination with 30 days notice, if you will allow me to leave now, I will pay the full amount due for the following month. He was surprisingly sympathetic. "If necessary, keep your family there until the end of the month. I'll take over after that." "No, fine. Thank you," I said, truly appreciative. "Would you please do me another favor? Would you be able to inform them today? I would prefer not to engage in that discussion myself." "Of course," he said. "I will visit this afternoon." After that was resolved, I packed my car as full as possible with the larger items. I made arrangements for a small unit by calling a storage facility. I then sent a text to my friend Emma, who lived on the other side of town. She offered her guest room as soon as possible for however long I needed it. I had left by early afternoon. Nothing that I couldn't live without was left behind. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt a weird lightness as I drove away. The duties and expectations of my family were not weighing heavily on me. The calls and texts began to pour in that night. My parents and Jessica's texts, which ranged from irate accusations to heartfelt entreaties, were continuously buzzing on my phone. I turned off my phone altogether after ignoring them all. The receptionist at work contacted my office the next day. "Your relatives have come to visit you. They were waiting in the foyer as I came downstairs. Mom is weeping. Dad holding his chest dramatically, Jessica wringing her hands." I led them outside to talk. Not wanting to make a scene in front of my colleagues, they begged and pleaded, promising to change. Mom sobbed about not having anywhere to go when the landlord evicted them at the end of the month. I listened to it all with a detachment that surprised even me. When they eventually ran out of words, I answered with a composure I didn't realize I possessed. "You picked this. I told them you locked me out of my own home and had me sleep in my car. You may do the same today." I had moved into a new apartment across town 2 weeks later. I had deleted them from my social media accounts and banned their phone numbers. The landlord acknowledged that they had moved out. Thus, I need a new place to live. For the first time since I became an adult. I had no one to please except myself, so I was really on my own. Now that I wasn't having to support 4 more individuals, my savings account started to increase once again. Perhaps sooner rather than later, I would have enough for a down payment on my own house. I occasionally questioned whether I had been too severe in severing their connection. However, I would then recall the night I spent in my car shivering. The years of being second best, the months of being used. And I was certain that I had made the proper decision. Story 3. Hello, this is Sarah. I'm going to read you Layla's story today, which goes by this title. For their lavish wedding, my pampered sister and her fiancé insisted on receiving my portion of the inheritance. You will remain an old maid. That money is not necessary for you. I delivered them all a surprise that caused them to rethink their demands after they claimed that our parents had taken her side. Okay. Come on. The faint glow barely reached the empty seats around my kitchen table as I gazed at the lone candle flickering on my little cake. It's my 27th birthday. It wasn't exactly how I had planned to spend it, but really what had I expected Layla make a wish? With a smile that was far too joyful for the melancholy little get-together we had planned, at the last minute, my buddy Jen pushed me. I tried to ignore the well-known sting of disappointment as I closed my eyes and extinguished the candle. Mom had made her customary explanations over the phone earlier that morning. We simply cannot make it tonight, Layla, honey. Right now your sister's wedding preparations are taking up all of our time. The guest list, the flowers, and the location. You realize how much labor it's all correct? In any case, turning 27 isn't a particularly significant birthday. Yes, mother. No issue, I had responded instinctively as I usually did when they choose Cassie over me. For as long as I could remember, it had been that way. Cassie took private dancing lessons when we were youngsters while I attended community center group courses, because there is a limit to the budget. Layla. Cassie got a vehicle for me and a mall gift card for her 16th birthday. They gave Cassie a vacation to Europe and threw her a huge celebration when she graduated from college. I received a department store luggage set and dinner at Olive Garden as a reward for graduating. I had long since ceased being surprised by the pattern since it was so predictable. Whether on purpose or not, my parents had always made it apparent that Cassie was the best child and I was the last. To Layla Earth. In front of my face, Jen waved her hand. "Do you want to open your gifts right away?" I nodded, ignoring my family's presence. I had decent pals, at least. Tonight, Jen, Marcus, and Tori showed up for me with wine takeout and sincere love. That had some value. I wished Grandma Rose could have been around when I unwrapped their kind presents. The only person in my family who ever gave me the impression that I was as important as Cassie was her. She would whisper and bring me a special present on my birthday. Don't allow them to make you less bright. Layla, my dear, the first birthday without her since she died of cancer was last year. And even after Grandma passed away, I continued to physically feel her absence. Everyone had been astonished by her will. Cassie and I each received $170,000 from her estate. My parents were obviously irritated by the equal divide and likely thought Cassie should receive more. I recall my sister's initial response. At the will reading, Cassie had said, "Well, I'm using mine for a down payment on an apartment," with her fiancé, Josh, nodding approvingly next to her. It is the responsible course of action. I didn't fall for the ruse, even though it was evident that anything I did with my fortune would be less responsible. Rather, I invested the whole amount in an investing account. I knew I wanted Grandma's present to flourish, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it yet. Somehow it seemed like Mom was still watching out for me. More wine. I was brought back to the present by Tori's offer. Yes, God. I held out my drink and laughed. How am I doing with all the others? The focus of the evening changed from my birthday to casual discussions about relationships, work disasters, and summer plans. For a few hours, I just relished the company of individuals who genuinely wanted to be with me, forgetting that I was the neglected daughter. I washed up a few dishes after they departed and looked at my phone to see if there were any missed calls from my folks. Cassie's belated birthday greetings. Mom just texted me to ask if I could assist. Next weekend stuff, wedding invitations. I was preparing supper a week after my birthday when my phone called. I nearly put my mom's phone on voicemail when I saw it, but my curiosity won out. "We would be delighted to have you around for supper tomorrow, Layla. Are you able to attend?" I was instantly dubious of Mom's strangely nice voice. "What's the event?" As I stirred the spaghetti sauce I was preparing, I inquired, "Does a family meal require a special occasion? All we want is to see you." At first I assumed they intended to express regret for missing my birthday. Perhaps they wanted to make apologies after realizing how upsetting it was. Considering our past, it didn't seem likely. However, people do change, don't they? "Yes, I'll be there at 6 o'clock. "Excellent. I'll see you then, my love." With cautious optimism, I hung up. Perhaps my 27th birthday would mark a turning point in my family's history. Perhaps they would at last consider me to be on par with Cassie. God, I was a fool when I got to my parents' house in the suburbs the next night. Josh's elegant Mercedes and Cassie's automobile were already in the driveway. I straightened my outfit. Nothing special, but I had rung the doorbell and tried. Layla Mom smiled broadly as she opened the door. "Enter, enter. Everyone is here already." The fine china was used to arrange the dining room table, the type often saved for Christmas and Thanksgiving. Dad was pouring wine. Cassie was rearranging the flowers in the centerpiece as Josh was looking at something on his phone. When I walked in, they all glanced up. "Hello, sister." With a tone brimming with manufactured honey, Cassie spoke. "You're welcome to join us. I didn't mention missing my birthday at all." I couldn't quite locate the tension behind the grins, and there wasn't even a belated happy birthday. We took a seat to dine, talking about Dad's golf game and the weather in an awkwardly courteous way. I kept expecting someone to mention my birthday in order to apologize or provide an explanation, but that never happened. At last, when serving dessert, Mom cleared her throat and looked at Cassie and Dad. "We needed to have a serious family conversation, which is why we invited you around, Layla." Suddenly realizing that the supper was not about making apologies, I set down my fork. "What sort of conversation?" I asked, but I had a sick feeling in my gut that told me I wouldn't enjoy what happened next. Cassie straightened in her chair and cleared her throat when Mom turned to face her. My sister started off by tilting her chin in a self-important manner. Josh and I have been organizing our wedding, as you are aware. With that superior tone in her voice, Cassie said, "We've calculated all the expenses for the wedding." I was really familiar. Reserving the Grand Plaza downtown for 150 people. It's going to be far more expensive than we anticipated. Slowly not knowing what this had to do with me, I nodded. My parents looked at me with a look of odd anticipation. Cassie pointed to Josh and our dad and added, "We've all talked it over. Additionally, we believe that you ought to use your grandmother's bequest to assist cover the cost of the wedding." I looked at them, hoping for a grin or a giggle to break through. This must have been a joke. However, their expressions stayed solemn, almost expectant. They really thought I should give Cassie my $170,000 inheritance so she could get married. Are you not being serious? At last I was able to state that we are really serious. Mom got right in. Family helps family. Layla, this is necessary for your sister. I gazed incredulously at each of them. What about the inheritance that Cassie has? Grandma gave her the same amount. Josh said, "That's for our apartment." As though I was intentionally being naive. We have already begun our property search. I was astounded by the boldness. Cassie retained her inheritance for an apartment, and they expected me to pay for her lavish wedding. Years of being the afterthought all of a sudden. The less significant daughter became plain clear. "No," I answered firmly. "My inheritance will not be given to you." Anger twisted Cassie's face. "For what purpose do you even need it? You're not getting married anytime soon, is it? Anywhere, you're not even in a romantic relationship. While the money lies there, you'll become an old maid." I was stunned by the anger in her voice. I turned to my parents in the hopes that they would intervene and inform Cassie that her attack was inappropriate. Dad instead nodded in agreement. "Layla, your sister is right. Cassie must consider Josh and their future. What are you going to do? All you're doing is holding that cash." As though to lessen the impact, Mom reached across the table. "We simply believe Cassie needs the money more than you do at the moment, honey. You've always been quite self-sufficient." Self-sufficient, a code phrase for something less significant. With a loud scrape on the floor, I got out of my chair. "I refuse to give you my money. Grandma let me handle it, not to the wedding fund of Cassie." Mom yelled, abandoning the soft exterior, "Don't be selfish." Selfish. Keeping my own inheritance is selfish of me. Grandma gave Cassie exactly the same amount. If the wedding is so essential, she can spend her money for it. I left before they could reply, disregarding their pleas for me to return and behave sensibly. I scarcely noticed the journey as I drove home in a daze of hurt and rage. Almost instantly, my phone began to vibrate, but I chose to ignore it. I eventually checked my phone when I returned to my flat. Mom called me 5 times, Cassie called 3 times, and I received many SMS from them, expressing their disappointment in me. How self-centered I was. The way I was destroying the family. I poured a big glass of wine for myself and shut off my phone. I felt numb most of the time, although I wanted to cry sometimes. When I put my phone back on the next morning, I was inundated with fresh messages. I received texts from my parents expressing their dissatisfaction, and my selfish behavior indicating that they had obviously spent the evening phoning my aunts and uncles. The message from Atlanta was standard. "I heard what occurred from your mother. It's unbelievable how obstinate you are about this. The wedding of your sister is a once-in-a-lifetime occasion. It should be an honor for you to contribute to its specialness." None of them were worth my time to reply to. What might be said that I had been accustomed to being the family's last priority. So by Monday, I had had enough of making sacrifices for Cassie at work. I made an effort to concentrate on my marketing tasks, but my thoughts kept returning to the family meal. The fact that they had planned the entire evening to claim my inheritance astounded me. Worse, they actually seemed to believe that my refusal was wrong. The text had slowed by Wednesday, but they had become more menacing. "You will come to regret alienating your family," Dad texted. "Layla, blood is more important than water." That evening, I encountered some peace by blocking their numbers. However, the break was brief. When I turned the corner to my apartment building on Friday night, I came to a complete stop. It was obvious that Mom, Cassie, and Josh were waiting for me at the entrance. I thought about going back, but they had already noticed me. "We must speak." Reluctantly, I walked up to Mom and she called out. I said, keeping to myself on the sidewalk, "There's nothing to talk about. I'm not going to ask you out." With eyes as swollen as though she had been crying, Cassie took a step forward. "This family is being torn apart by you. Are you aware of your actions? Your behavior has angered the entire family. I didn't ask everyone in the family to help me with my personal money. You did that? I pointed out. Mom sadly shook her head. We simply don't understand why you're acting so obstinately. Your sister is getting married. Let me make this very clear, I said, maintaining a steady tone despite my internal turmoil. Cassie and I both received the same amount of money from Grandma. She can use her inheritance to cover the cost of her wedding, if it is that important. Cassie made a dramatic gesture with her hands. Do you mean me? We've chosen our apartment already. With that money, Josh and I have plans. I also have financial plans. I answered plainly. Josh moved forward, assuming the role of a lawyer. Be sensible, Lila. Nobody is requesting that you forfeit your future. However, the family's top priority at the moment is Cassie's wedding. I gave them all three a look. My mother's hands are wringing. Josh's patronizing smile and Cassie's outraged expression made me feel incredibly at ease. No, I would say. Leave me alone, please. I walked past them to the building entrance. With trembling hands, I swiped my keycard as the door shut behind me. Cassie's irate voice reached my ears. This isn't over, Layla. I thought the confrontation at my apartment would be the worst of it. I was mistaken. The following Monday, I logged onto Facebook to find my notifications exploding. Mom and Cassie had both posted lengthy, emotionally manipulative messages about family loyalty and sacrifice, without naming me directly but making it painfully obvious who they were talking about. Mom's post read, "It breaks my heart when someone you've sacrificed everything for turns their back on family. As parents, we give and give only to have our love thrown back in our faces." Cassie's was even more dramatic when your own sister betrays you right before the most important day of your life. You realize who truly loves you and who doesn't. So grateful for everyone supporting us during this difficult time. The comment section under both posts was filled with relatives and family friends offering sympathy and condemnation of my apparent selfishness. And Linda had written, "Some people just don't understand the meaning of family. So sorry you're going through this." Uncle Bob added that shocking behavior. She should be ashamed. Not a single person asked for my side of the story. I decided not to respond. Engaging would only escalate things, and frankly, I wasn't surprised by how quickly everyone took Cassie's side. It has been that way my entire life. My cousins had always received hand-me-downs from Cassie, but never from me during family gatherings. Everyone fawned over Cassie's successes while mine were footnotes in the discourse. But the internet effort was just the beginning. 3 days later, my supervisor summoned me into his office. His expression extraordinarily somber. "Lila, please close the door and have a seat," he said. I sat down, my thoughts running over conceivable job concerns that may have come up. Had I missed a deadline? Made a mistake on the Henderson account? I received a troubling phone call yesterday. He continued, looking uneasy. "From your parents, they mentioned some unsettling things. That you're untrustworthy, that you betrayed your family, and that you couldn't be trusted with corporate obligations either." The blood drained from my face. They had really phoned my job to try to destroy my career. I had never imagined them capable of such a degree of vindictiveness. According to my employer, I don't often get involved in workers' personal lives, but this was so alarming that I felt compelled to address it. I described the entire circumstance. The bequest of Grandma, demanding my money while retaining hers for an apartment, was my sister. The increasing harassment combined with my rejection. He shook his head after I was done. "Lila, Jesus. It's really intense. Don't stress over your work. I suspected there was more to the tale. I just wanted to let you know about their actions. Thank you." With a wave of relief, I spoke. "Thank you for informing me." As I got up to go, he remarked, "Take care of yourself and let me know if you need anything." With an appreciative nod, I went back to my desk and took a seat. A text message from an unknown number buzzed through my phone. "You are a self-centered jerk who is unworthy of a family." After blocking the number right away, I received another SMS from an unidentified number. "Everyone is aware of what you did. How are you able to coexist?" For days, the abuse persisted. I hardly knew the messages from distant relatives, strange phone numbers, and anonymous emails. Cassie and my parents appeared intent on making my life intolerable until I gave in. I felt the walls closing in on me one night as I sat by myself in my apartment after banning 3 new numbers that had sent me unpleasant texts. Although I had always been the odd one out in the family, this well-planned assault was something else. They were attempting to isolate me and break me down until I was forced to give up. At that moment, I recalled the texts I had received from Cassie some months prior. I had preserved the messages because I had a feeling they would be important in the future. I went back to January in our text history. Cassie was there requesting to meet with her ex-boyfriend Michael in secret in my flat. She was already engaged to Josh at the time. I must utilize your location tomorrow afternoon. We need a secluded place while Michael is in town. Keep it a secret. And thereafter. We appreciate you sharing your unit with us. I still feel something for him, but I'm not ending my relationship with Josh. Michael is only entertaining. Over the course of many weeks, there were additional texts like that. While wearing the engagement ring that Josh had given her, Cassie had been unfaithful to him. Use my residence as a covert location for our meetings. I had also mentioned the pictures she had sent me over the Christmas break. She and Michael are shown cuddling on his couch in selfies, Mud. The betrayal was further twisted by the fact that she was wearing the beautiful dress Josh had bought her as an early Christmas present. As she had done since high school, she had sent them to boast about the numerous guys who were interested in her. With my finger lingering over the screenshots, I gazed at my phone. It would be nuclear to use these. Cassie would be devastated and her engagement may be called off. There was a part of me that hesitated, the part that had been trained to defend my sister at all costs. Then, however, there was another text. Your parents told everyone how awful you are as a daughter. You have no one on your side. Something broke inside of me. My employer had been contacted. I was being harassed by them all day and night. Everyone I knew was being turned against me by them. It was all because I wouldn't give up money that was mine, without waiting for me to change my mind. I chose the images of Cassie with Michael and the screenshots of her communications. I located my contacts and Josh's number, then clicked send. I included a little statement just for peace of mind. I wanted you to know what Cassie has been keeping from you, Josh. I apologize for having to break this news to you. I get a rush of mixed feelings as soon as I send it. I'm relieved that I was able to defend myself. I feel bad about perhaps ruining my sister's relationship. Fear of what could occur next, but largely a weird feeling of peace. The facts were out. At least it wouldn't be based on false information, whatever occurred now. The morning arrived too soon. My phone was fiercely shaking on my nightstand when I woke up. The screen revealed Cassie's name. I inhaled deeply before responding. How were you able to... She let out a scream. With rage, her voice roared. How in the world could you, Lila? Even though I hadn't anticipated a polite conversation, I was still surprised by the sheer anger in Cassie's voice. I was betrayed by you. She went on, scarcely stopping to catch her breath. Josh ended the engagement. He called it all off. Everything we planned, even the location and the flowers. I didn't try to patch things up or apologize right away for once. You were the first to betray him. Cassie, you exploited my residence as a place to cheat on him. That was not the same. It had no significance. Desperation cracked in her voice. It was never meant for him to know. Her reasoning was so ludicrous that it was nearly comical. It wasn't the cheating that was wrong in Cassie's world. They were catching it. She cried, "You've destroyed my life." Are you content now? I pondered the question for a while. Was I content? No, but I also wasn't sorry. First, you attempted to destroy my life. Dad, Mom, and you, I added softly. You gave my supervisor a call. The family turned against me because of you. All because you hoarded your inheritance for an apartment, and I refused to give you my inheritance to pay for your wedding. The two are not the same. She let out a scream. I said, "It's to me," and hung up. My parents phoned next, so I knew it wasn't finished yet. I listened to my father's menacing message after letting it go to voicemail. You cannot be forgiven for what you did. Lila, you solved this. You tell Josh you made it up over the phone. You're not our daughter unless you get him back for your sister. There were more messages. Mom went through phases of rage and guilt. Cassie sent abusive paragraphs. After a time, I stopped reading them. Weeks went by after a few days. A cousin informed me that Josh had declined to make amends with Cassie, despite the greatest efforts of my family. It seems that once he presented her with the proof, she confessed everything in the hopes that he would pardon her. He didn't. Officially, the wedding was called off. They lost their deposits. The date was made public by the ideal location. The pricey gown was still hanging in Cassie's wardrobe. And I was somehow to blame for everything. According to my family, anyhow. I attempted to move on, spend time with my true friends, and concentrated on my career. I continued to periodically check my investing account as I saw the steady growth of the amount my grandmother had given me. I chose to put some of it toward a down payment on a home of my own. I did it because it seemed right, not because Cassie had intended to. I got a formal-looking letter in the mail 3 months after the engagement ended. My parents' notarized declaration was enclosed. Richard and Diane Miller officially certify that Willa Miller is no longer their daughter. By removing herself from our life, she has purposefully caused irreparable harm to our family. From this day on, we see all familial responsibilities and connections as broken. After reading it twice, I put it on the counter in my kitchen. It should have saddened me because it was final. Rather, I experienced a sudden lightness. It seemed like liberation, but they had given me what they believed to be the worst punishment. I spent some of my money as a down payment on an apartment I liked over the course of the following several months. I joined a hiking club and resumed dating, meeting attractive individuals who were unaware of my family's problems. To get over the years of being the underdog, I even started going to therapy. I wondered about Cassie sometimes. Had she gotten engaged to someone else? Did she continue to reside with our parents? Did she ever think about our past interactions? However, neither she nor I reached out. The picture of Grandma Rose remained on my bedside table. There were moments when I thought of her keeping watch over me and applauding my decision to finally defend myself. She used to remark, "Don't let them dim your light." I would have allowed them to do it for years. No more. I got a little parcel in the mail with no return address a year after I was disowned. Grandma Silver's locket, which she wore every day, was inside. After the funeral, Mom retained the one. I knew who sent it, but there was no message. Maybe that was Mom's last admission that Grandma would have supported me. After securing the locket around my neck, I turned to face the mirror. Gone was the girl who had always said she was sorry for taking up room. The lady who had been staring back at me was suddenly towering, unrepentant, and unburdened by the need to win favor. I would never get it. Grandma's actual gift had been the impetus to finally leave a family that had never really appreciated me, even though the inherited money had served as the spark. Some may consider the loss of my parents and sister to be a tragedy, but I had already lost them a long time ago, or maybe I never had them in the first place. I said, "Thank you, Grandma," as I lightly stroked the locket. Spring was approaching outside my window. Fresh starts. Grandma always wanted my light to shine, and now it was, and no one would ever take it away.